Testing. Okay, is everyone ready? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Chambers. Welcome to those who are here in the audience today that are presenting before the council on a variety of topics. Welcome for all those who are listening at home. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, April 2nd, 2024. The time is 9 a.m. We have a full agenda today. We're going to deviate from the agenda for just a moment under appearances. We're going to reverse number 2 and number 1. And as we move forward for introduction purposes for the people who are appearing today, I'll turn this over to Jenny before we have Britt C. Bennis, our city administrator, conduct the meeting. Jenny?
Thank you, Mayor. If it's all right, I'm just going to go to the podium and to address the full council, if that's okay.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, thank you. Good morning. I just felt it was a little bit easier to talk to you this way than from the corner over there. I just wanted to give a brief update on some housing things and make some introductions here. We have a crew from our Laurentian Chamber of Commerce Quad Cities United for Housing group that I am a part of with the city. We're here to talk today about some of the things that we have as priorities and goals within our group for the Quad Cities, which includes the city of Virginia. One of the top ones that we have as a goal through this housing cohort process is to talk about education and what housing looks like, what attainable housing looks like for everybody in the community, what types of housing options are out there, and just more information that we can get to you, to other city councils and the public and residents throughout the Quad Cities is one of our goals. We do have rental rehabilitation and new development as 2 other goals. I'm going to pass some of that information to be disseminated to Brad Gustafson here from St. Louis County. We also have Teresa Applewick from the Laurentian Chamber here today, who is also part of our cohort, and then our kind of guest speaker, Dante Tomasoni, who will be talking about some developer aspects and just provide you any information. Feel free to ask any of us questions throughout our presentation, but it's really just to kind of inform you and give you an update on some housing issues. So with that, can I hand it over to you? Okay.
Thank you. Welcome, Brad, Teresa, Dante, to the committee home meeting today. We look forward to your presentation. Thank you, Brad. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. So I'm going to touch on the rental rehab aspect of one of our priorities for the Quad City housing. So this would fit great with the new rental ordinance. There's a lot of rental properties in the town, and a barrier for landlords is the cost of rehab to keep those units viable. So Scott Zohorik from AUA and Dana Hiltlinen from the city HRA and myself met and started discussing and framing out a pilot program for the Quad Cities. So we'd be, Dana has an annual survey that she sends out, and she included a couple questions to the landlords in regards to the state of their rental units. When was the last time they've had significant rehab, and in their eyes, how much rehab do their units need? And there were 8 landlords that responded, and they owned combined 247 units. And that's in the Quad City area. 116 of those units have been rehabbed within the last 10 years, roughly averaging about $20,000 in cost. Obviously, costs are skyrocketing, so the costs are going to be a lot higher in regards to that. So kind of the framework that we've drafted is we'd be looking to pilot between 1 and 6 unit buildings. It would be a 1-to-1 match, and it would be a forgivable loan after a 10-year period as long as they're meeting code requirements and that they're in good standing. So we'd be looking at up to $15,000 with a 1-to-1 match. So in regards to that, so if a landlord comes to us and says they just need a roof, well, we're going to do a whole home inspection as well to make sure that they're addressing any other health and safety issues, to make sure that those homes are habitable, not just fixing the roof, but addressing a lot of the other issues there as well. So the three of us met with IRRR to discuss our pilot program. They're on board, and we'd be looking to apply to them in this next round this summer. So some of the funding sources, we'd be looking, hopefully for a little contribution from the Quad Cities, IRRR, and then the landlords would have a little skin in the game as well. So that's just the pilot program. It's still in development right now. Is there any questions on that piece of our priorities?
Yes, Mr. Guston, I would have one question. With respect to the inspection on your pilot program moving forward, I think it's a great idea as we try to find some housing moving forward in the Quad Cities, particularly in Virginia, of course. So when you go through this inspection program, say, for example, somebody applies for a loan for $15,000 for the roof, as you gave the example, and the landlord puts a skin in the game for the other $15,000, you're going to inspect the entire home for other health and safety issues. Those inspections are going to be conducted by our staff, is that correct, in the state of Virginia, or in conjunction with, or how does that work? If it's in conjunction with the raise rental code, if you have your inspection and then our inspection as well, how does that synergy work?
Yeah, I mean, it could be partnered with that. Also, the other three communities in the Quad Cities don't have a rental ordinance like that, so it's not going to be built into our guidelines, but we could certainly use, the inspections from the city.
Yeah, I think maybe as you move forward with your pilot program, I'm sure you'll vet that out, take a look at that, because that's what we do. That's what our is for, is that we pay our staff to do. They're trained to do so. So if it's just going to be in the city of Virginia, maybe, that inspection portion of this pilot project may include our inspectors. So you're not getting inspections from your pilot program for the Quad Cities and then our inspectors as well. So there's not a conflict, so that there's a communication, a synergy between the two. So thank you, Brad, very much.
Yeah, we don't want to double up on efforts. So if there's already an inspection that's been done, we would utilize that for sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on Mr. Gustafson's presentation so far from the city? From staff, from council? Brad, thank you.
Okay, and then looking at our third priority is new development. So one of our cohort members is a property owner in town that's been trying to get a developer to purchase and build on his property. So we've been working in conjunction with him, introducing them to developers and trying to be that matchmaker to get a project off the ground. But we also are looking at other development opportunities, something that can be replicated across the Quad Cities. Looking at the area housing studies, the need is very tremendous across our area. Multifamily, we need up to 165 units. Senior housing, we need up to 135 units. Single-family homes, we need up to 120 for our area, and that's over the next 10 years. So kind of breaking those down by category, and some of the developers that we've talked to, the costs associated with that. So for a multifamily dwelling, probably the lower end of the cost per unit is $250 a unit. So in order for that developer to make the project feasible, it needs to be financeable. So we're estimating at least $1,700 a month per unit is the rent that would need to be collected to make that project viable. In order to afford that rent, the renter would need to make at least $68,000 per year and that's based on 30% of their monthly income. Anything 30% or more is considered cost burdened. In our area is severely cost burdened, and that would equate to about $32 an hour. And then looking at senior housing, fourplexes, quadplexes are very desirable. No maintenance, single level living. The average cost to construct a fourplex would be $350,000 a unit. Again, looking at the financing piece, you would need to charge at least $2,500 a month for just one unit. And to make that affordable, the tenant would have to make at least $100,000 to afford a fourplex unit. And that's $48 an hour. For somebody that's on, retired and on a fixed income, that might not be feasible for a lot of people. And then looking at single family homes, the lower end of the cost per square foot is $250 that we've found. Just looking at it from the standpoint of a Habitat for Humanity, their homes are about 1,100 square feet between a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom. They can build it for about $170,000 with their volunteer and some donations. But at $250 a square foot, 1,100 square foot home would be $275,000. You know, as far as a monthly payment for a mortgage, including principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, they would need to make, the monthly payment would be at least $2,300. And again, to have that affordable to the owner, they need to make $92,000 a year to afford 1,100 square foot home. So that's some of the numbers that we found in regards to the options for rental, single family, multifamily units. That's why these aren't just being built. The cost is too high to make them profitable. So that's why subsidy, you know, what we found is subsidies are needed to make these viable. Any questions?
I do have one question. We'll go to Councilor Johnson first, and then I'll have a question for Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brad. I truly appreciate it being laid out like this. I think it's, I think for folks that live at or near the poverty rate, these numbers are unattainable. You know, looking at these are salaries of not beginning teachers, not beginning city staff, not beginning people who are working at the state. These rates, these hourly rates are people who have been there for a while and probably already established in their jobs who already have housing. I think that the misconception that, well, people just need to, you know, work a little harder and get, you know, $32 an hour, that's significantly, even in the city of Virginia, our employees, they have to be pretty high up on our seniority list or in their skill set to be making that to rent an apartment. And I think that's why we have this juxtaposition of all of these houses in Virginia that haven't been maintained because the rent needs to be low enough that they can be rented. I really appreciate that you all have worked so hard on this and are bringing it to us like this, laid out, what the needs are. And again, this is a quad city need. What benefits Gilbert, what benefits Eveleth, what benefits Mountain Iron, benefits Virginia, and vice versa. And I'm guessing this doesn't include like Britt or Biwabic or all those other places where people would be able to get housing maybe a little bit less and then commute on a regular basis. I just spent several days in the cities in two different portions. My brother-in-law lives west of Chanhassen and commutes into St. Paul once or twice a week. And it's still cheaper than trying to find something closer. And he rents a 3-bedroom house. And he does quite well for himself and his family in designing mining equipment. So we have had at least 3 different organizations. You were part of one of those, Brad, last year, come to us and say, we want to build, we need help, this is the housing we need. And that need has only grown. The other part of this that I think is really important, that with more housing on any 3 of these, the tax base would be expanded. And we would be able to finance the things we want to do. I know there's a lot of concern that even though we only passed a 4% levy in the city of Virginia, people's taxes still went up significantly because of the other players in it. And the only way we have control over that at the council is to encourage development, both with businesses and with other housing. So I want to, again, thank you all for your work on this, and it is not lost on me what our needs are. The house next door to me has been occupied probably for 5 years. They just got a bigger house because their family grew, and now that house, I'm guessing, will be back up for rent. And I don't know anything about it other than I know it's a well-loved house. And I am hoping that the owners, who I don't know, are able to get it back on the market as soon as possible, hopefully for a family that will be contributing within the community. So please keep working on this. Please keep coming to us. I know you've heard no a few times already, but eventually, hopefully, we can get some forward progress in this development and really expanding our community to help people know that they are wanted here, no matter what role they fill. One of the concerns is $92,000 a year, that's not a McDonald's job. I'm guessing that's not even McDonald's supervisor job. And this is why people need 2 or 3 or 4 jobs just to exist. It doesn't count the toys or the car payments or the insurance or anything like that. To add to this, my insurance carrier is no longer going to be covering people in Minnesota. They're just done. And that's happening to a lot of people. There are multiple insurance companies that will no longer do mortgage or house in Minnesota. They're just stopped. And those costs are increasing as well, which adds to these. I'm sure that this is based, the average monthly is probably based on current insurance for the building owners. That's going to go up. These numbers will probably, if we see you in 6 months, all of these numbers will go up significantly, I'm sure. So it feels like we're in a no-win situation, but I think we're at least making progress, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you, Councilor Johnson. Did you have anything that you'd like to bring up, Councilor Beyondich? Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. And last night we had a planning and zoning meeting, and Jenny has been working very hard on kind of rezoning where these tracts of land would be. And one of the points of discussion was if there were something built for elderly, that opens up a whole stock of housing for others, for the families. So it was an interesting conversation, and I appreciate that we're starting to move forward on at least even the pieces, the tracts of land, and what it would be zoned and available for. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. So our job, obviously, is to help you in this study group, and we have dedicated staff to come there. And thank you for St. Louis County and the Laurentian Chamber, Teresa, for all your involvement in organizing this housing program to get these pilot projects together. So, we have to find a way to remove all the obstacles to help this come to fruition. So I'm going to give you, I'm sure you may probably already know, I knew you were giving this presentation today, so I know the individual who owns this property says you can say it to the public if they want. I'm looking to try to develop my property up in Midway, right on the corner of Highway 135 and Highway 53, which overlooks the mine pit. It's a significant amount of property he's looking to sell. So he said I could say his name. I don't know if I should or not, but I'm going to because he said it was okay. Bill Colbert. The realty, they run a realty company up there. He's got some property up there. He's looking to try to develop into something with respect to housing or whatever the case may be. So maybe another individual for maybe you to reach out, maybe Jenny and others as we move forward. Because as we all know, the city of Virginia has confined space. We don't have an ability to expand our curtilage, so we have to work within the parameters of the properties we have available today. So it's going to be a challenge, maybe not like the other Quad Cities, and we're going to be a significant challenge. So thanks for investing in our community. So, any questions or comments from anybody else before we move on to the additional part of the presentation? Seeing none, thank you.
One other thing I'll say before I hand it over to Teresa and Dante is, the Quad City needs everything. So, hyper-focusing on one area, you're going to fall short in others. So we need to focus on all aspects of housing. And just to add something to what Councilor Johnson said, the median income in Virginia for homeowners is $68,000. The median income for renters is $15,000. So, just looking
Sorry, how much?
$15,000 a year. So looking at, the cost to construct and the cost needed to collect rent is severely unattainable, so. That's all I have.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Carissa, welcome.
Mayor, council members, Teresa Applewick, Laurentian Chamber of Commerce, thank you for having us today. I just, before I introduce Dante, who's been introduced several times already, but, I think it's, maybe some of us have made decisions for fixed rate mortgages, and that's lovely, but over the past several years, we understand that mortgages haven't stayed at these lovely rates of 2%. If you didn't get a 2.5% mortgage, 4 years ago, and you got a variable rate mortgage, and now you're at 7% or whatever that looks like, and you bought a $200,000 house, your payment is radically different, even when you bought when you could buy. So, we're not looking, when we talk about the affordability of housing, we aren't talking about the affordability of housing for people who make $45,000 a year. If you make $90,000 a year, we want you to afford your house too. If you make $150,000 a year, we also want you to stay in your house. So it's not as simple as just the nuclear family who makes $300,000 a year because you both work in mines and have lovely jobs. There are people who are blessed to have that kind of life here, but we have all walks of life here, and we should have housing for people who have all walks of life here. So that's what we are dedicated to in this group, being a welcoming community, being a stable community, and finding places that we can infill housing even, trying to create programs that make sense for our communities, all of our communities, as you know. And it's worth noting for those who are watching that might not understand, but the Laurentian Chamber does not work just for the city of Virginia. The Laurentian Chamber's interests are for the Eastern Iron Range. So that's the Quad Cities, Buell by Waback. We're creeping even more east because what makes sense for the Quad Cities makes sense for the whole Eastern Iron Range and vice versa. So we do want housing of all kinds, and we are working towards whatever makes sense for our entire region. So without further ado, we've been listening to all of you over the past many, many months as we've been going through this before the updated housing study was recommissioned and even prior to that. So we understand that there's a sensitivity to the education aspect of this non-invested person, of this someone who doesn't have an interest in making money in our community, who just wants to help create this education component. And we've found the guy to help create that education piece. So Dante Tomasoni was a prior business development and operations and legal counsel for P&R Properties out of Duluth. He currently works for government relations, government affairs at Cirrus. But he is going to be with us today to walk us through the importance of development, how to attract development, what communities can do to prepare yourselves for development. So Dante, if you could join us. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Tomasoni.
Good morning, Mayor, councilors. Thank you for having me today. Teresa, thank you for the introduction. So Teresa asked me to join today as a non-interested party to speak to some of my experience in development and some of my experience now even at Cirrus. And as part of my job as our Director of Corporate Affairs at Cirrus, we're looking at developing housing all over northern Minnesota and helping. So a little bit on my background. So I spent the last 3 years developing over 400 units of multifamily property, all at a market rate level, a little over $100 million in real estate. I was a part of negotiations of over $10 million in incentives with communities that helped make that real estate happen. It was my job to do all the economic research in the current communities and any communities we wanted to expand into. I actually expanded the geographic footprint of P&R companies while I was there, and spent a lot of time traveling the state, the region, and talking to leaders. And I talked to probably 15 to 20 different cities and city councils, and I advocated for housing on many different levels. So Teresa asked me to come now that I'm with Cirrus. Our primary goal is to build airplanes. I'm not building anything on the range. I'm going to use my background to help in any way I can to answer any questions, and then just talk a little bit about what I experienced talking with counselors, talking with developers, and hopefully that's helpful. I'm here because the range is near and dear to my heart. And my little competitive side, I'm kind of pumped that a Chisholm guy's helping out Virginia, but so I want to talk a little bit about that. So first, I think it'd be appropriate to kind of start with the state of the market. The state of the market that the housing market is not just hitting the range; it's hitting everywhere. It's hitting Duluth, it's hitting the Twin Cities, it's hitting California. Now, California is another political animal, but it's hitting the entire country. And it's an unprecedented issue in our country. So we've seen interest rates rising before in the 80s, significantly higher interest rates. The difference is it was $40,000 to buy a house the last time we saw 7%. It was, $35,000 to buy a house. My dad bought his house in Chisholm that we're selling. We have it listed at $175 right now. We bought it for $30,000. You pick that house up and you move it to East Duluth, and it's a $400,000 home. And so you've heard the testimony on the cost to construct, how expensive it is now. So with developers, everything is math. And I've told this to councils before, and I've often found out, it's interested that there's many different ways that people look at developers, whether they assume that these developers are piles of cash that can just drop apartment building wherever they want, and then they take in all the money and they make all this money. But the truth is, developers borrow just like the rest of us. To build an apartment building, they have to borrow from a bank. And they put 20% down, while they used to put 20% down. Now banks are requiring almost 55% down on these buildings, which is a lot of cash to come up front with. And so they have the cost of money, which is your interest rate, the amount of money that they have to put in, and then you've heard the cost to construct. It's insanely high right now, and that's all post-pandemic effects of inflation and everything that we've experienced. And then on top of it, now you have this housing crisis. I've been calling it the three rocks in a hard place, which are interest rates, cost to construct, and then lack of supply. And so we don't have this supply. They're running into each other. The communities need it. Virginia needs it. Duluth needs it. The Twin Cities needs it. And we can't find ways to bridge those gaps. And so one of the things that we did that was kind of effective with communities is you can hire consultants. I'll get on that in a second. But essentially, the developer does all the math. And they say, I'm going to come to Virginia. I'm going to come to whichever community I want to build in. Cost to get out of the ground, cost of land, what can I get for rents? The trouble the range has, and I looked at the range while I was developing, is that we have a lower rent that you can usually grab. I mean, it's high for here, but the cost to construct isn't any lower up here than it is anywhere else. So now they're looking at getting $800 a month, say, for a one bedroom, when they could get $1,400 a month somewhere else, right? So they're facing that challenge. And if essentially a developer is going to go, we can't make that work. They call it the gap, right? And they're like, how do we make that gap work? What cities have at their advantage is they have tools that developers don't have. Especially on the range, you have this great thing, the IRRR, that's going to help with utilities. Most places don't have that. It's really, really a neat thing. It's really unique, something that shouldn't be taken for granted. And the IRRR is committed to helping housing across the range with utility construction. Utilities is one of the biggest costs to construct that there is. And then there are other opportunities like TIF, bonding. You can't bond for a private development, but you can bond for infrastructure and utilities to help a development. There are tools that cities have that are lower cost to the cities that developers don't have access to, because the developers pretty much have access to a bank and equity. And then the rest, they're at the subject of the market. So if a city can help them clear those gaps, you can get housing. And so the trouble with that is, the trouble has been is so many cities have been resistant to say, or some cities, depending on who they are resistant to certain either kind of developers or bridging that gap because you feel like you're just giving money to a developer to make money, right? But the truth is the cities need housing. I always like to say the best approach a city can make if somebody wants to build in your community is to find a way to say yes. Instead of finding a way to make sure that the city's protected, find a way to make the city to say yes. Just find that way, find that way for the city to say yes. And you can do that by analyzing all the numbers. You can do that by sitting there talking to developers going, what does your number sheet look like? There is a consultant, Elders. I don't know if you guys have ever used Elders, so you know them well. They make sure developers are on the up and up. They make sure their numbers are tight. They make sure everything makes sense. So if there is any gap to be made, it's been double checked. The city has been protected. We actually like working with them as a developer because they create a level of confidence in the numbers that you're providing. And so when you do that, when you find communities that find a way to say yes, find a way to get housing. My latest project was in Eau Claire. It was a twin 130 unit development. The city of Eau Claire had never done TIF on a apartment building that did not have underground parking. So we had main level parking. This was the first time they ever did it, and they had that approach. They said to us, "What do you need?" And we told them, we bridged the gap, they use Elders. They said, well, we've never done TIF on something like this before. And I said, well, here are our numbers. We need this to make it work. Otherwise, we just can't make it work. And they chose to, and now they're getting 260 brand new market rate units. Now, Teresa wanted me to speak a little bit to not only market rate, but the other types of, low income, affordable, the types of housing that you get. So, first thing I learned about getting really well developed in the real estate market is our personal psychology affects how we see real estate. It affects everybody from Brian to myself. I mean, my first home was a twin home in Bismarck, North Dakota, because it's the only place I could get a job and it was the only thing I could afford. And I growing up on the range, I thought I would never buy a home that I had to share a wall with someone. What's the point of that? And but I can tell you my experience was great. I didn't see my neighbor that I shared the wall with. My psychology changed, right? And so the need in communities and the need for people is that the truth is with real estate is there's something out there for almost everyone, whether it's a low income model, whether it's a twin home, whether it's a duplex, a triplex, a big single family home. If you need housing, you need to find a way to get to all those things. With affordable and low income units, what you do is you get access to more funds. That's what it allows. So if there is a need in the community, as opposed to maybe what we would want or what our personal psychology tells us the community deserves, if there is a need, then you can access different funds based on different income levels for different renters, right? So if there is a need, and I'm not advocating for one or the other, I'm not advocating for LIHTC, I'm not advocating for affordable. What I can tell you though is that say there's a certain income level in your community, in any community, that has a need and there is a developer willing to build, what they do is they have access to bridge those gaps. Low income housing, for example, has federal funds that allows it to make happen. And what you do is you may not get, this big, beautiful, shining star up on a hill of an apartment building, but what you'll get is you'll get new housing in your community. You will open up the housing cycle. And what I call the housing cycle is, for example, some of the people in that income range might be sitting in older homes somewhere in Virginia and they're not getting out of them. These homes need rehab. These homes need someone who can afford to redo the siding, have the energy to redo the siding. And they might move into this different affordable level of income apartment building because there's no maintenance, right? There's no maintenance on apartment buildings. And when they move out, then you'll have maybe a young new mining family that can move in. They know how to fix siding, they know how to fix plumbing, they have the energy to do these things. And now you've created a newer home and you've rehabbed a home. So there's this cycle that happens. And so when you look at the different aspects of affordability versus market rate is I always say market rate is kind of it's kind of a false term in the sense that market rate is what your community can afford. A developer's biggest issue is it's not fixing the plumbing. It's not, do you have a bad tenant? All this stuff happens. It's not, did the lights go out? Did the dishwasher break? Developers don't care about that. Developers care about one thing. They care about vacancy. So if you have a market rate building and nobody's in there, they will lower the rents to the market. Unfortunately, that could be bad, but that's why they do so much work up front. With a market rate building, it's a little bit harder to access funds. As you get to different affordable levels, you get access. TIF, for example, if you guys could, I would recommend that the city take an opportunity to do a TIF education piece. TIF is really, really complicated. It takes time to learn through. The state has some resources online that are pretty good. But TIF, for example, in the state of Minnesota, if you go to 80% of your median income, you can get access to more funds to help a developer bridge that gap. And you're by no means creating LIHTC, right? So you have different levels that you can access, 40 to 50%. So it gets you opportunity to grab more funds. The other thing about TIF is you can do different projects based on whether it's a redevelopment zone. Maybe you all know this, I'm sorry if you do. But you can, if it's a redevelopment zone, you can get access to different funds. If it's a greenfield, you're gonna have a real hard problem getting access to funds, so you might need to put an affordability piece into a greenfield development. So learning how to access those funds, finding the way to say yes, understanding that we're in a really, really, really difficult market right now, something that's never, ever happened, where the need for housing is butting up against the impossibility of trying to make the numbers work. And so where I wanted to give you a piece of, if I could advocate for anything in your community is really opening up your mind to find a way to say yes. Kind of be aware of your own personal psychology, that maybe what we think is best is not what a community needs, because I think where communities make a biggest mistake is letting their personal psychology get in the way of what actually is needed in your community, and then taking the time to go, how can we make things work? In this market and in this economy, I think those are the communities that are going to find flourishing housing faster. And with that, I'm open for any questions.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of comments I'd like to make and some of the challenges that we have. And the first thing I'd like to say is that I think we're going to be open to all types of housing, regardless of what the need of our city of Virginia and the Quad Cities in particular, but the need for the city of Virginia. When we make decisions as an elected body, we have to make decisions for the city of Virginia. How does that benefit? How do we attract housing in the city of Virginia? And you're right about the psychological aspect of it, to try to find a way in which to provide some type of new housing regardless of what the issue is and what the challenges are and what the ramifications are once these housing units are fixed. And you touched on the interest rate, the cost of construction, and the availability of the property, which is associated with it, which is a challenge for us. So as we look at some of these things, trying to find the gap funding, I think we're all willing to say yes to try to find a way to work. That's why we have Jenny on board and Britt, and that's why we're partnering with the Laurentian Chamber of Commerce and others. And thank you for coming, Dante, today and laying that out. Tax increment financing is a huge issue. The tax abatement, bonding, and the locations of trying to find that property is a challenge for the city. Do we have cash money to infuse in that? How is our bonding market? What's our bonding capacity, our debt ceiling for bonding? How does that affect us? And the fact that, what is the investment of the developer over time? So their initial investment, they want to recover that investment over a period of time. It's not 20 years or 25 years or 30 years, it's less than that. So to find a way in which for them to recover that based on the partnership that you're trying to establish through the pilot program is very important. But you're right, I agree with you that we have to find a way to say yes, just find a way in which to find the funding for that. The funding sources that you laid out with the IRRR and others through Greenfield and those kind of things are all challenges that we have. But within the city limits of Virginia, tax increment financing, which we are aware of, we have some tax increment financing available. We're issuing some tax increment financing for some of our public projects. And so we're aware of that. That's an opportunity for us moving forward. So how do we as a city, and we're going to have to figure that out through Jenny, through Britt, through the Lunches Chamber, and through presentations like yours, Dante, that we're going to try to find a way in which to find some avenue to provide some type of housing within the city limits of Virginia and the Quad Cities as well. So those are just some comments that I have. Thank you very much for making the presentation today. I'm sure we have some other questions. Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
See, Mayor, you didn't even need me.
Oh, please.
You didn't even need me.
I didn't what?
You didn't even need me. You're already there.
Oh, no, well, I just repeated what you said, and we have talked about it in staff, so you just reiterated this challenge that we have, and I appreciate that very much.
A little note on TIF, if you mind, Mayor. One of the most interesting bullet points I ever got on TIF was through a TIF expert that I worked with. And, people will say, well, if we do TIF on a project, that, we may not get to see the taxes for 20-some years or whatever. 96% of TIF districts that have been created for housing, once the district is closed, the entire amount of tax that could have been captured during that TIF district is usually paid back within the 4 or 5 years. And that's because of appreciation and all the other things. So that's the one that really hit me, if I could ever throw a bullet point. So you'll get it back. But you need the housing first, right?
We do.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, making that point. Appreciate that. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate you coming in. The personal psychology, I think, is the key. Me and my family have been low-income workforce housing my entire life, still am. And I think that one of the things that happens is we have a tendency to listen to the people we associate with and think that's the truth. And where I've been and where I come from, my truth is making payments every month, making a decision between going out to eat once or buying food for the whole week. And those folks are as important to this community as the people who can just go buy their four-wheeler cash on site. I think we forget that a majority of the work done in this community is done by low-income and workforce people. The people who are running our restaurants, who are running our garages, our mechanics, are all workforce housing. And when we say we need to build this $275,000 homes here for those folks, what was presented earlier demonstrates that doesn't happen. It can't happen. We're seeing now, because of taxes, folks, teachers, dual income teachers, insurance agents, are wanting to move because their $400,000 homes on Northside in Virginia are no longer applicable to them because they don't need the space. Their kids have graduated, they need to go somewhere else. And so what you're talking about, the cycle, and allowing folks who might be a little bit older who can't manage or use their two-story home to go into single-story, brand-new construction, our elders, is exactly, I think, the parts that we're missing, the whole cycle, that whole picture. And that if we can do that, and I appreciate we need to find a way to say yes. It's very easy to sit in this room and say, no, I don't like that. No, we need to study it. No, no, no. We've done the studies. We have you here. We've got people outside of this room working very hard to figure out how do we grow the Iron Range, how do we grow specifically the Quad City area and our neighbors. And I appreciate you coming in and your perspective, because I think it demonstrates that we can find people who have no skin in the game whatsoever. And that's still the same message that we're getting from the people who are totally 100 invested in this community on seeing it grow. So I thank you for that. And I appreciate, again, the time you've put in and that you took time out of your schedule to come here to help us understand. And I would ask that if we need you to come back, are you willing to come back and have other conversations?
Of course. I told you the range will always have a spot in my heart. And so,
appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Tomasoni.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Mr. Tomasoni, any other questions, comments from the council or staff? Any other final comments or any additional information you'd like to disseminate today, Mr. Tomasoni?
No, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors, and to reiterate, if there's anything else I can help with, I'm happy. Teresa has my number. So,
well, I'm sure we'll be asking for some more information from you, some more presentation. So, thanks for coming in, Mr. Tomasoni, and being part of this process.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Teresa.
Dante. Mayor, council members. So thank you so much. If you guys have any questions, we are always available. You all know how to reach me. president@laurentianchamber.org for anybody listening in. Give us a call at the chamber, 218-741-2717. If you want to chat about this, if you just have any questions on what we're working on, this United for Housing group meets a couple times a month. We do workshops together. We are actively pursuing development, education opportunities, any pursuit of active development within our Quad Cities area. We know the opportunities that do exist. We have valuable resources at our fingertips. It is finding the place that is willing to start with yes and pursuing that. So that is what we are looking for and pursuing. So we would love an opportunity. We will find the next opportunity to come back. If you have any questions, if there's anything we can dive into for you all and find somebody to come in and speak to you, please let us know. We are willing to bring those people in to help out in all of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa. And just for a moment, I know Jenny and Britt has been actively involved in that. So anything that be brought forward to help facilitate that, they'll certainly bring that for us moving forward. And we look forward to some additional information, more presentations, and how that progress goes with your pilot program as well. Before you leave, did you want to make a plug for this coming Wednesday?
Yes, please join us. Business After Hours, Washki, the GMC store, so the original, the OG store, Washki Auto Plaza, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, Wednesday, that's tomorrow, April 3rd. It's going to be business after hours, catered by Sawmill, always a good time. March is a good month for them, but we ended up being snowed out last week. So this is a off week for us. And then following that, next week is going to be Breakfast Connections at the library. Please join us at the public library, Virginia Public Library. Revive Virginia will be hosting Breakfast Connections April 7th, 10th, sorry. Thank you. April 10th in the basement at 7:45 to 8:45. And that is my favorite because libraries change the world and librarians should be running the world. So thank you so much. And we look forward to another opportunity to come back.
Thank you, Teresa.
All right.
Appreciate it very much. And thank you all for coming. Brad, Dante, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Britt?
Thank you. Back to item number 1 is Pat Wirtz from Krause Anderson and John McNamara from Wold, here to discuss our Public Safety Center project. And we also have Sean Lewis from Krause Anderson as well.
And I understand that we got Mr. Wirtz, Mr. Lewis, and of course, Mr. McNamara from Wold. Just to make the announcement that Bob Fitzgerald from the Bemidji office for Krause Anderson is retiring. Mr. Wirtz will be taking his place in the line as Director of Operations. Then Mr. Lewis will be taking the place of Mr. Wirtz. So welcome again. A little change, but in the hierarchy, but no change in the performance and the service you provide.
I told Sean you have to wear a vest too to the meetings and got a match. Just kidding.
Welcome.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for having us. So yeah, we're talk about your Virginia Public Safety Project. Obviously, kind of brief history on that. We received bids back on August 31st, and they didn't come quite where we wanted to with budget. So over the course of the last 4 months, Wold and John and his team have been working very hard on essentially right sizing the building to get the right square footage out, compressing some of the spaces, working kind of hand in hand with Councilor Johnson and the chiefs to kind of make sure that the cuts are not going to impact the building long term and still get a very beautiful building, that'll serve the community for many years to come. So I kind of attached, Britt kind of handed out, was the overall budget summary sheet. So kind of the high level looks at that, roughly about just shy of $4 million was cut out of it. I've gone back a lot of different areas. So right now, overall budget is in line, but in order kind of to do that right now, we did have to reduce the solar square value number we're carrying, a little bit of the FF&E, roughly about $240,000. We're still working on a few things to go back. I know civil engineers working on the landscaping to get that reduced, but there's stringent B3 requirements, so there's still kind of a big number in there. So the idea is that should be reduced. How much is yet to be determined. And there's a couple other mechanical items, a few of those components too, that will get back and that will replenish the funds on the solar and the FF&E. So we're at a spot right now where we feel comfortable kind of moving forward to go back so we can take advantage of the nice early spring. And then some of the site work that was done last fall, 70% of the building pad, I got soil corrected and got that completed. So the intent would be, moving forward in May to finish doing that, starting putting foundations, early as May, obviously upon your blessing. One of the items too is, they took out the site fence to go around it. So for future to go back, so when they had the fence for those gates, they're electronic. So you had kind of two options. You could save an additional $26,000 by removing all the electrical on the conduits, or in the future, if you want to add those gates back in, keep the conduits pulled to that. So that way, all you have to do is add the wire back. And then by doing that, you would save. If you keep the rough ends in, you save roughly $7,000 for electrical and some of those connections. Those are some of the things where right now it's reflected on that. But so if they want to, these are the things we kind of need to think about. Don't need that decision on that today, but in the coming months. Kind of as we talk through the final things of those changes, then we'll get everything corrected and do a change order back to so we reflect our GMP accordingly. So on the budget, I think, like I said, it touched base on the biggest changes on there. And part of that too, we had two separate contracts, one for the house demo project, getting the site cleared. And remember last fall, we change ordered in roughly 1.1 million. Part of that value we carried, we didn't use it all. So some of those funds you'll notice on the budget sheet, it was roughly $675,000. We figured it'd be easier just to get that job closed out and then do all the rest of the site stuff, part of the main project itself. So you'll notice that on the budget sheet as well, and that's kind of the biggest changes. So right now for the construction portion, it's doing $24,737,842. As we keep working through that value, will be reduced and then replenish the FF&E and the solar line. So that's kind of a recap in a nutshell.
Okay. As we look forward to this, Pat, Mr. Lewis, I just want to dispel the rumor that's going out there and the information that was disseminated by the newspaper to the editor regarding the quarters, that the sleeping quarters for our staff over there at the new public safety facility, that there has been some misinformation that was disseminated by a former fire chief who had indicated that we're not going to have any sleeping quarters for our personnel there for whatever reason. Where that information came from, I don't have any idea. At the last council meeting, I did mention it, but just want to mention here today, those who are listening at home who had not had a chance to read or listen to the council meeting, that no, we are going to continue to have sleeping quarters. The budget cuts are coming in a very prudent and economical manner, and in maintaining the integrity of the quarters and the services that they provide and how they live the environment there. In addition to that, to make sure that we are compliant with the regulation, particularly with B3. So I know I spoke briefly to Mr. Wold about that, about the rumor that's going on. I just want to make sure that that is not that is not the case. So, Mr. Wold.
Mayor and council, yes.
Mr. McNamara.
That's all right. I can own the company. That's
my
wonderful.
apologies.
Just to be clear on it, and this goes back to the meeting that we had a number of months back with the council, we really focused with the value engineering on the project to preserve much of the character of the building and the programmatic areas that are important to the project. And so to be clear, related to the sleeping quarters, there are 12 dorm rooms that are in the project as of today. I think one of the areas that we did change is the layout of the sleeping rooms, because we did eliminate the command garage that was on the building, which did have an impact on a couple of sleeping rooms that were in that area. But we did rearrange that so that we could maintain 12 sleeping rooms in that area. And to reiterate to the council, we have not modified much of the site prep for the building to allow for those expansions to occur in the future should the city grow beyond what the current program is. that area where the command garage is still being prepped for building in that area, should the city decide to move forward with additions in that area, and also to the north, where we are still prepping the site for additional apparatus space. And so we are striving to keep programmatically those elements in the project that were important early on and allow for space for those areas to grow should they need to in the future. So.
Excellent. Any questions from the council? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to reassure the public that the people who are using these spaces are key in designing them. Our police and fire have been instrumental in the meetings, multiple meetings that do not involve the rest of us, to make sure they're getting what they need. As we have done from the beginning of this, both police and fire are used to using what they have, especially the police department, especially the fire department. So everything that they need is in this, and they are okay with it moving forward, both sets of chiefs. They have been very vocal in what they need, and I have been supportive of that. The one thing that you've touched on, Pat, and I want to really reiterate, that the only landscaping in this building should be to meet the B3 compliance, the minimum B3 compliance. I've been saying this since we first started these discussions. This is a utilitarian building that helps keep our community safe. If we can plant $4 starter trees as opposed to $400 full trees, if that's within B3, that's what we need to do. That's the kind of stuff that's been frustrating me for this, as we have said. And I remember an email from last week that the landscaping got brought up again. That should not be an issue at this point. There should be zero concerns about landscaping. Minimum B3 requirements, end of discussion, because we need this building built. We had a very lucky year this year, and it looks like we got some work done, which was nice to see. But it needs to get built. We need to stop worrying about how pretty it's going to be, and it needs to be utilitarian and not ugly, which we already have. We have a building that's going to be safe for our employees. Us buying fencing and putting it up ourselves is going to save us a lot more money than the 12 other people who are going to get paid from putting up fencing. We have the ability as a city to buy that stuff ourselves and install it ourselves. So I really, and I'm kind of saying this for you, Sean, as the new guy, these guys have heard it 1,000 times, but it's a utilitarian building that is going to help keep our community safe, and that's what we want out of it. And just, you had mentioned conduit. Keeping the conduit in is an important part because it'll save us money and time in the future. And it's a very low cost thing to plan for the future. So for me, I prefer that conduit be run just like we did at the ITMEC for future development and that kind of stuff. But otherwise, I think we're as close as we can be, and I appreciate everybody's time as we're working forward, and welcome aboard.
One thing to note too, kind of back to there's a rooftop patio to go back for the firemen or police, whoever can go back. That's staying in the project. That was an area where it could have cut, but importance for people to go have a break and get away from things. So that's staying in the project. So that's the thing too to look forward back. So.
Okay, thank you. So if we stay on schedule, we make the decisions we need to make moving forward. The anticipation to putting another shovel in the ground to begin putting the foundation in would be sometime in what month? May, thank you. Britt, do we need to take any action at this meeting with respect to this presentation?
Yes. Pat's asking for.
And the action would be to?
Proceed forward to go back, and we'll start establishing our GMP kind of based off these numbers off here. Start awarding, procuring all the material, and get ready to rock and roll.
Okay. Lights on?
I will move that we move this to the city council meeting for formal approval.
Councilor Johnson moves to approve and move this to the council meeting for final approval as requested by our staff, Carl Sanders and Wold Architects. Is there support? Support by Councilor Friedlieb. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We do have a quorum present, so that moves to the next council meeting next Tuesday. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks for taking the trip up. Welcome aboard, Mr. Lewis.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll still be around, so. Yeah, you're not giving me that easy.
Sounds good. Is there going to be a little soiree for Mr. Fitzgerald when he bails?
Well, not really.
Off to the sunset, right?
Yep, that's right.
All right, let me know, will you?
Got a new cowboy hat to ride off in sunset.
Perfect, all right. Thank you very much. Take care, thank you. Britt, in the back is Mr. Don Eder, and he had spoke to you earlier, and you asked him he should come to one of the council meetings. I know he's not on the agenda,
He asked to come to one of the council
Yeah.
meetings to talk about.
but all right, to bring him forward, so
Absolutely.
we're going to do that. Mr. Eder, would you want to come forward, please? I know you had a conversation with me, and of course, I referred you to our city administrator, and now you're here to talk about a contract for pigeons in your area, so could you welcome Mr. Don Eder, and what do you have for us today?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors. I was made aware that we don't trap pigeons in the wintertime. So I think it's the most opportune time. Their feeding grounds are restricted. There's a lot of different feeding stations, things like that. I actually know people that actually feed the pigeons, which is neither here nor there. So, that being said, I'd just like to offer my services. I think I have a unique opportunity to trap pigeons, and just thought I'd bring it up. And I know you have a trapper that does that in the summertime, but it's just if you have room for another trapper, I would appreciate that opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eder. What we'll do is, and thank you for bringing that up to myself and to our city administrator and coming to the community home meeting to talk about that. I think we'll have to figure out if you need a license to do that, how that occurs, what the process is moving forward, and what method you would be using to trap the pigeons, and how the pigeons are relocated, for example. So we'll have to figure all that out.
Absolutely, and that's what this is about, getting that process started.
So what we'll do is we'll keep you in mind that you are now making your offer of services for that. So we'll be communicating with you moving forward as to what we need and what we need from you in order to potentially take a look at giving you the opportunity to do that.
Excellent, thank you. That's exactly what I thought we'd get started.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eder. Appreciate that very much. Thanks for your patience. Britt?
Item number 3 on the agenda is approve the resolution to reappoint Podpasker Agency as the agent of record for property and liability insurance for the city.
This is your recommendation? Yes. Move to approve by Councilor Friedland. Is there support by Councilor Beyondich? Is there any further discussion? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my only concern, quite honestly, is the rate of $38.10, which hasn't changed since the early 1990s. To me, that's a concern because everything has increased, and I'd like to know why it's not increasing, and is it affecting our service at all? So those are my only two questions as we look at this moving forward. And then my second question would be, have we gone out for a quote or an RF, whatever, for services? Thank you.
Pam?
Thank you, Mayor. To address that, Councilor Johnson, he just feels like this is sufficient for what he is doing. He helps with our insurance as far as the liability on the property and things like that, and reviews that with us. He also, I'm not sure if he gets contacted directly with our claims from the office or if the league is being contacted directly, but he assists with the claims as well. And he feels this is sufficient and doesn't want to increase his price. And he does do a good job for us. He keeps track of everything, and I email him quite frequently if we purchase vehicles or anything like that that needs to be added or taken off the insurance policy.
Does that answer your questions, Councilor Johnson? Okay, thank you. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is review the garbage collection credit for residential and commercial property due to the ASME strike that we had spoke about the previous council and committee the whole meeting. And then I had promised I would give you some information regarding a municipal garbage service and what we had looked at back in 2016. And in 2016, right before I came here, we were looking at a bag-based pay-as-you-throw system, which would require the 30-gallon dumpsters rather than the large ones we have, so everybody would have their own individual dumpster system. And at that time, we had blue bags also, so realize this quote again is really old and it is also part of this blue bag system. But we were looking at a new revenue source of an increased revenue of $225,000 back in 2016 due to going to the individual cans. Of course, the information is from 2016, so it's a little older, and our load times are a little older. We had recycling back then also, so we was estimated that our recycling was going to almost double because we had the ability to offer recycling cans in addition to the individual garbage cans. So then people could recycle more and with a more regular schedule, and contributing the cans to them, I think, would also incentivize them to recycle more. We had a lot of people that would call over the years asking for the bins, and we kept telling them you can use a box or a laundry basket, but repeatedly you'd see a lot of people that just had the bins using them, not people using other things. So I think that it was part of the incentivization. I did also throw into the packet copies of the city code that deals with refuse hauling. The way our code reads right now, we are the only ones that can do any refuse hauling because our code says so. We don't allow licenses to anybody else to do any garbage pickups, recycling pickup, or anything. So that, just to keep that in the back of your mind, that's the way that the code is designed at this moment. And if we wanted to change that, we'd have to discuss that. So this is just the information I wanted to get to you, that we had looked previously at doing individual cans for people, and it's something we could look at doing again if that's what the council so chooses, and there might be an increased revenue possibility if we were to do that.
Okay, thank you. I know this bodes for more conversation moving forward, and you're providing this informational for us to consider. But for me, it's about, how do we provide service? How do we cut our expenses with respect to how we provide those services? And what's the cost-benefit analysis of having single garbage cans as opposed to multi-use garbage cans? And if we're considering a change, of course, the code would have to be changed as well, which can be done. So I'm going to ask, and maybe put you on the spot, Jim. Do you have any questions, comments, concerns on anything with respect to this garbage service that we're considering? Would you have anything? If not, that's okay. Okay, thank you.
Not at this time.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. So, the garbage collection credit, I know that in the last council meeting, I opened my mouth, without having all the information about, maybe we should give some type of a relief from some of the owners as a good faith gesture. But after seeing the numbers that were provided by our staff, I think I was a little ahead of the game there, so to speak. And that as far as being given credit for that, I just want to say for those residents and business owners who incurred a fee as a result of that and emptied their own garbage up the landfill, we appreciate that you're doing that moving forward. I know that you're cognizant of the need to do that instead of letting the garbage build up. So, in that perspective, I don't have anything more to say. I just don't think that it would be beneficial. It's a huge cost to the city out of our waste enterprise fund to do that, and there really isn't really no benefit for the most part in the long term. So, thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that it would be prudent, just as we look forward and to make it easier for future councils, that we do look at what the ordinance or the code change would look like. It doesn't mean we have to do anything, but I think it could help, if even to the point of if there's a company that wants to just do recycling in town. I know there are many people who would pay a per use fee to have it picked up at their home, as opposed to especially in the wintertime, trying to recycle. So I will make a motion to direct city staff to look at changing the garbage ordinance to be less exclusive. Does that make sense, Pam? Or more inclusive, whichever word's better.
Sure. Thank you. Councilor Johnson has a motion on the floor to direct staff to take a look at the garbage service and the code and moving forward with that. Could you read back the motion, please? It was well said by Councilor Johnson. And then, okay. As you're doing that, would there be support for that motion by Councilor Johnson? Is there support? Support by Councilor Friedlieb. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Hey, Britt?
Thank you. Item number 5 is discuss the vacant positions in the cities, and this comes from the last Personnel Committee meeting, the Accounting Clerk and Finance. We had discussed at the Personnel Committee meeting to fill the vacant Accounting Clerk 3 with an Accounting Clerk 1 this time.
That is your recommendation?
Moved.
Move to approve by Councilor Beyondich. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think I'm going to start doing this regularly. I'll just note that the pay rate of $29.67 is less than the $32 an hour that would be needed for an apartment rental. Just as a point of reference when we start talking about what our workforce looks like.
Yeah, thank you. So the difference between Accounting Clerk 1 and Accounting Clerk 3 is that dollar some hours stipend. Now, when the previous employee started, that employee started at Accounting Clerk 1 and worked their way up to Accounting Clerk 3. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you. And how long would it take to get to that?
Depends on if there's a vacancy, or if this one, the previous one, there was a vacancy that she moved into.
Okay.
To Accounting Clerk 3.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. That's your recommendation? All right, thank you. Looking for a motion or more additional comments, questions, concerns? Do I have a motion to fill the accounting clerk position in finance from accounting clerk 3 to accounting clerk 1? Is there a motion? Is there a motion? Oh, we did that already? Oh, I'm sorry about that. 71 years old now. So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
The next one is the Library Associate Youth Services, which is a position at the library. Our Youth Services or Children's Librarian did receive a new position, so this position is open. Jody has updated the job description to more accurately reflect what the job duties and the desired qualifications would be, and it is in your packet.
And this is a position that's being vacated?
It is being vacated. Our children's librarian has gotten a great new job at the Arrowhead Library System, so we are going to miss her greatly, but we're hoping we can find somebody equally as great.
Well, that's a fantastic opportunity, for her, and who's did an outstanding job with youth services at her public library. So,
I'll make a motion to approve the hiring of the youth services library replacement.
Councilor Freely makes the motion to replace and this position. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Beyondich. Jody, would you please come forward, please? Thank you.
I just have a
Question by Councilor Beyondich.
Yes.
So all of this in here that's kind of redlined, when it comes forward to the council, all of that will be one that's in our packet.
Mm-hmm.
That will all be changed.
Yep, so that was just to show you what we changed. Most of it was just updating the language.
Okay.
And also then, if you look towards the end, we have the youth services and then we also have our adult and outreach, and just clarifying that, yes, they are responsible for certain programs and they're responsible for certain populations. Just so we have one that is doing our younger population and one that is working with our older population. So we just made sure that it was more robust and actually what our librarians are doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jody. It has been moved and supported. Further discussion, I think, is important that we are moving this forward to the council, so all the councils have an opportunity to take a look at these changes that were made and to make a decision based upon that. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 6 is approve the memorandum of understanding from the 6th Judicial District, North St. Louis County Range Mental Health Court.
We had this last year as well.
Correct.
They have a drug court, range mental health court, alcohol court. Any concerns or comments about that? Assistant Chief Nicola, you're good to go? Gives a thumbs up? Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Johnson and supported by Counselor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
It was moved and supported to approve the memorandum of understanding, I'm sorry, wrong meeting. Item number 7 is approve the memorandum of understanding with St. Louis County Sheriff's Office and the Virginia Police Department regarding treatment of security information.
So moved.
Moved to approve by Counselor Johnson, supported by Counselor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 8 is a memo from Jenny Bourbonnais in your packet to discuss participation in the Adopt a Drain 2024 program with North St. Louis Water Conservation District.
No cost associated with this to us. Jenny, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. No, there will be no cost to participating in this Adopt a Drain program, and they're looking to advertise this as participation in EarthFest, so I think the timing is ripe for this to happen.
Very good. Thank you, Jenny.
I will move the Adopt a Dream program forward.
Moved by Counselor Johnson. Is there support by Counselor Beyondich? Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
And I don't know, when our kids were little, this was a favorite thing to do, is take the wagon out in the spring and in the fall and clean all the drains in our neighborhood. So it's kind of nice to see this come back, maybe, that people take ownership of the drains and the flooding in the street. And if you see a drain that's covered, I take the dog for a walk and take a stick and pull everything out so everything can drain. So I'm happy to see this, and I encourage, it's great for young kids to get out and do. Thank you.
So it goes from a red wagon program to a formal program. All right, thank you. Has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mayor, before we go to items 9 and 10, Brian Silber is on his way here to talk about the golf course leasee interviews we had last week. If maybe we want to take a 5-minute break and then we can get Brian.
Yes, please do. Let's take 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, we took a quick sabbatical break. We are still in open session. Looking for a motion to move to closed session for item 9 and 10.
Open session still.
No, I'm sorry, what?
Open session for the other item of concern to meet with Brian Silber about the interviews.
Oh,
from
that
last week.
doesn't come, okay, I'm sorry. One other item of concern before we go into closed session. Brian, with respect to the golf course lease discussions. Brian, Park and Rec Director. Good morning.
Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
Last Thursday afternoon, myself, Steve Fingeroos, City Manager Britt C. Bennis, and representatives from the council that were on the interview committee for following through with the letters of interest for those that were interested in operating the restaurant at the golf course. Met with our 3 applicants for that position. All 3 of the applicants have great pros and a few cons. But at the end of the day, I think as a committee, and Councilor Beyondich, you can weigh in on this also. I think we are leaning in the direction of Tim Krachowski, who is the owner of the Copper Nickel in Aurora, to pursue contract negotiations with.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, Britt, members of the committee? Britt?
Thank you. We did, like Brian said, we did heavily weigh every applicant's pros and cons. And because of the long history that Mr. Krachowski has in, number one, the liquor industry and also in the restaurant industry, we feel at this time it would be a good fit for what we're looking for at the golf course.
Okay, thank you. Councilor, anyone? Councilor Johnson?
So I'm guessing the next step is to authorize city staff to move forward with contract negotiations based
Correct.
on...
And if the council wants to appoint some council members to sit on that committee with us, that'd be wonderful too.
Okay, I will make a motion to direct city staff and up to 2 city councilors to move forward with the contract negotiations.
Okay, moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support? Is there support? Support by Councilor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? With all due respect, I don't know if we need 2 councilors on there, but that's the motion. I don't have a problem with that. But staff normally does that, but 2 councilors, that's just fine with me. So we'll have to appoint those councilors. But right now, the motion on the floor is to move to enter into contract negotiations with Tim Kachowski. Is that correct? From the Copper Nickel on a golf course lease for the restaurant. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. So should we recommend, well, you want to make that recommendation for appoint 2 councilors at the council meeting where we have 2 other councilors that'll be present, or?
I think that would be most appropriate.
Yeah, thank you. We'll do that.
No, we have to go to the council meeting, and it was up to, not to, up to 2. Up to 2, so we don't have to appoint anybody, but I'd just like to have that option.
And if we do, under that motion, come to the council, if we do decide we want to appoint up to 2 councilors, we'll do so at the council meeting, so we have the other 2 councilors available to weigh in as well. So that has been moved and supported and voted upon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
I will move to go into closed session based on Minnesota statute for both items.
Okay, Councilor Johnson moves to go into closed session. Is there support? Support by Councilor Freely. By further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed. Motion carries. We are now moving into closed session. Thank you. Those of you who are not part of this process, I would like to ask you to vacate the City Council chambers at this time. Thank you.